On day 6, we will be hanging around Branson. We'll go out to Dogwood Canyon Nature Park and then come back to the Presley Country Jubilee for the night. As we drive out to Dogwood Canyon, we cross over Castle Rock Lake, and now we're at Dogwood Canyon. We'll be going to the Visitor Center first and then taking a tram ride along the road before returning to the Visitor Center. Let's get started.
Good 3,000 acres from a young couple that was running a trout farm all the way up to the chapel. They were fourth generation owners though. Their family had owned it for over 120 years. The locals have been referring to this little hidden gem as the Garden of Eden for that time. Cool, right in front of us, and it's going to be on your right, a treehouse, Masters treehouse. That show's been running on Animal Planet for nearly a decade now. P. Nelson and his crew, they came out here in 2016 and they built their very first Ozark treehouse, their one and only. It only took them 21 days to do it. They did it by harvesting all the wood from right here in the area. Pete picked out this site so he can use these 100-year-old black walnut trees. He used them for the support beams and a place to connect all the joists to. Yeah. Everything is Ozark related. The inside, the outside, the decorations and the exhibits. That's beautiful. That slipped out. You can't hold that against me now. That is the tallest waterfall in the entire state. 150-foot Indian cliff falls. And I see a couple of cameras out. Right where that young couple is, there's a little secret glass door. If you walk through the restaurant and the museum, right by the Black Bear, and our first archaeological find. Just to the right of the falls on that cliff wall are 3 Osage Indian burial caves right there. 2 up top and 1 down in the middle. They're usually covered. Grounds crew has been rappelling down and shaving off all the trees so we can see in them a little bit. They go 80 foot back into the rock. In 1991, they found 8 human remains, flaking tools, projectile points, a bunch of different sizes from the little bird points all the way up to the spearhead from 100 to 900 AD. So Osage. Right now we are following Little Indian Creek. We've actually got 3 creeks and 3 canyons out here. Hobbs Creek and Hobbs Canyon meets us in the parking lot where you guys came in at. Little Indian Creek goes up here about another half a mile before it turns to the east and cuts through Little Indian Canyon. And that is right where Dogwood Creek and Dogwood Canyon join the system. All 3 creeks form together. They all flow directly out to Table Rock Lake, which is 2 miles behind us due north. We average here on property, daily and naturally, excuse me, 54 million gallons of spring water. Now, one thing we don't have here in the Ozark Plateaus, we do not have very old trees. The logging industry cut most everything down in the 1800s looking for railroad ties. But they cut all the hardwoods around the sycamores and left them in their place. And that's because sycamores are a real pain to work with. They warp when they cure. They lose about 90% of their weight while doing so. So like take this big guy coming up on the right here. This sycamore's over 200 years old. Long time crossing. This is an Amish-built bridge. In 1991, Mr. Morris hired Daniel Schwartz and his family to come down from Seymour, right outside of Springfield, to build it. Now, being an Amish family means they did the entire thing by hand. No electricity, no power tools. Really an amazing feat. Another cool fact about the bridge, all the wood that you see used to build it, that's over 130 years old. Johnny reclaimed it from a deconstructed warehouse on the north side of Chicago, Illinois. It is a 130-year-old pine. Over to your right is a display case. Daniel and his sons donated some of the tools when they were done with the construction. Also, there's Wilderness Chapel up here on the left. Chapel was built in 2002, although it was designed to look like a chapel from the 1800s. All native wood from right here in the canyon was used to build it. The walls are short-leaf pine. The floor, rough-cut red oak, and the ceiling, eastern red cedar. What gives the chapel even more character, though, is the stuff inside. The piano, the pews, and even the church bell are all over 120 years old. They come from a tiny Lutheran church in Atlanta, Georgia. We usually do about 75 weddings a year. Dogwood Creek right here. We are going to cross it and follow it the rest of the way. Cold water, you can put rainbow trout in them. They need that to survive. If the water temperature gets over 65 degrees, it will kill the trout. Here in Missouri and Arkansas, in the Ozark Mountains, the water flows out of those mountain springs at 50 degrees year-round. That is very cold water, and the trout do really well out here in this environment. These little mini waterfalls are the most important thing on the property. Scientifically, environmentally, they change the whole complexion of the property. That's called a weir, W-E-I-R. Mr. Morris had 80 of them built on the property. First one's in the parking lot, and then he stacked the rest intermittently all the way up in the mountains. Number one is mountain streams and springs are very shallow. They just pour right out of the mountain. They flow right out to the lake or the river. You can't really have a whole lot of animals in 6 to 12 inches of water. The weirs, though, pooled up the entire creek. Behind each one, it's 6 to 10 foot deep, 3 or 4 foot wider on either side, like he created a giant aquarium behind each one. But there's a secret to spring water. Spring water does not have any oxygen in it. And this is true all over the world. When the water comes out of the rock, it can be 5,000 to 1 billion years old. That's how long it takes to get from the rain clouds down through all that rock and out again. That process takes so long. Oxygen is lacking from it. These weirs oxygenated this entire water system. In fact, once the weirs got put in, the native wildlife exploded. The stuff that the trout eat. Here in Missouri and Arkansas, we've got 60 different species of crawfish, 20 different kinds of minnows and shiners, thousands of different invertebrate insects, and about 10 different types of frogs. The trout now have plenty to hunt. I'll stop at this crossing. There's about 100 rainbow trout on your left-hand side, and about 20 big ones underneath this waterfall on your right-hand side. I'll throw a couple handfuls of food. So you can see these little piranha eat.
Can you see?
Oh, yeah, we see it. There's some pretty good sizes there.
They are, and their belly when they come up the thing is very red.
No.
Oh yeah, I see it.
Yeah, we'll try to stop at most of these spots on the way back too, to give the left and the right side the same opportunity to shoot it. There we go. Should have a nice clean shot up to the right. We do have native fish out here. Wild shiners and minnows, largemouth and smallmouth bass, 2 types of catfish, and a couple of different types of perch, bluegill. Morning, Bob. But about 90% of it is stocked rainbow in the area. The Chuck Wagon site, we did a really cool dinner tramp last fall when the leaves turned color. I took you on a tour at sunset and then brought you out here for a barbecue and live music at night. when I drop you guys off at the nature center or the gift shop or the restaurant, check out some of the pictures up there. We've had some unbelievable guests show up and play for us, like Johnny Cash, Kid Rock, Waylon Jennings, Hank Williams Jr. Off to the Bat Cave, Robin.
Cave entrance.
So that used to be the most used Indian cave on the property for a bunch of reasons. It's easy access here, ground level, it's big. Goes 100 foot back into the rock. It's about 20 foot wide, and it's got 12 foot tall dome ceiling. So you have a nice big area. The little creek that runs out of it, all the way in the back of the cave, there's a spring that does about 1,000 gallons a day, so you have a constant fresh water source. The Ozarks keep the caves the same temperature as the springs out here. They're 50 to 60 degrees. The bats make it home. So now it's our largest colony on the property. We've got about 10,000 little brown Missouri bats that live in there. You see, I get distracted real easy. Ooh, there's a belted kingfisher. Me. The reason why we call it Kids Cave is because you'd have to be that small to get back in there. It only has around a 24-inch ceiling to attach the entrance, but it is our second longest cave on the property at 255 foot. The spring on the property at 10 million gallons a day, the deepest point of the creek at 22 foot, and the longest cave, 335 foot long behind these falls. If any celebrity comes out here, this is the first place they hit. We've got consistently our largest rainbows back in here. There's a really cool handmade wrought iron observation deck up top there. You guys can access it by that cobblestone staircase.
That's different.
That is all natural. This is a favorite area of our guided fishing tours. I like bringing people up here. It's called the 7 pools. Each pool has about 20 big trout in it, and each pool will only be fished a certain day of the week. That's why it's so important for the 8 new spots that haven't been hit in 8 to 10 days. It keeps the fish super active and aggressive out here. They don't get what you call hook shot. Number 1, this is where Johnny taught his own daughter Meg and Waylon Jennings how to fly fish. Those two had never been fishing like that before. This is where they caught their very first rainbow. The kingfisher again, flying up the creek to the west. Next bridge we're about to cross is called Turtle Rock Bridge. Now, as we drive over the top, check out these turtle rocks. They're sitting on top of the left and the right railings. This is a super unique geological formation. They dig them right out of the ground like this. They have not been carved or manipulated in any way at all. They only occur one place in the ground in the entire world, right on the border of Arkansas and Oklahoma. Coming up on our right is the trophy hole. This is where the Dogwood Canyon record rainbow trout was caught 4 years ago. A young man from Elk River, Minnesota, pulled out a 19-pound, 32-inch rainbow trout right here. In 2017, they had the 100-year flood out here. I always remembered at this point because my manager, the lady who was training me, said we would have been 14 foot underwater at this point. Everything back in this area is less than 3 years old. Back to the left side to take it. You guys are in Missouri.
Are we in Arkansas?
No, he's in Arkansas. We're in Herring whitetail adventure.
Those are the antler growers. They start on March 1st, last week of February sometimes, and when the new ones start out of the base of their skull, the old ones fall out like a baby tooth. And they repeat that process over and over again. Sometimes moose, the largest of that family, they can grow 6. Strut. The grand elk is sitting down right here, Mr. Strut. That is as big as a, there's 5 different species of elk. What we're looking at are Rocky Mountain elk. Hi, good morning, mister. Good morning. That's one of our great big males right there. Yeah. Oh, that's a good boy. Oh, he's a good boy. Oh, he's a good boy. So, a purebred bison up in Yellowstone, northern Alaska, a male can reach 3,000 pounds and still be able to do all those things I said. Run 45 miles an hour, jump 6 foot in the air, swim for 15 miles at a time. It's really pretty amazing. She was born. Mama hadn't given birth to the new one yet. Usually, they can live for 25, 30 years. It's okay, Mama. I'm sorry. No, she is very pregnant. Yeah.
How big are they when they're born?
Oh, they come out about 30 to 50 pounds. Little bright red furry cows that look like they've been lifting weights in the womb, little white socks. Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, there was about 12,000 wild ones walking around. We thought that they were native bovine and we just named them that. Not even close. They're from Portugal. Christopher Columbus brought them over on his second trip in 1498. The Queen of Spain, it's an Italian guy, but who he sailed for was the Queen of Spain. They were her favorite breed, and she gifted him 200. He wanted a familiar food source when he returned on his third trip, and he dropped them off in Mexico. They never stayed put, though. He came back on his third trip. They were already 100 miles north. They kept on marching across the whole country of Mexico. It took them 150 years, but the entire herd, all the babies, they didn't leave anyone behind, crossed the Rio Grande, and then settled in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas. But they are the closest relative to the running of the bulls. That's a 2-year-old male. You see in the, you can see some of the yearlings down there are just what you call a spike. Whether it's a moose, an elk, a caribou, or deer, the very first year they grow, they just get one single antler grown out of their skull. I count 1, 2, 3, 4. And then by the second year, you can see young man here is already a 4x3 or going to be a 4x4 soon. Now, the little babies in this family, right, even moose, are born with spots and stripes. They have absolutely no scent for the first 6 months. The bison give birth in the middle of the herd. Babies are standing up in a couple minutes and they're running around in the first hour, but foundation up there from a trapper's cabin in the 1820s. And Johnny built this home directly on top of it. He designed it after a hunter's lodge he really liked in Santa Fe, New Mexico. That's where the architectural style comes from. And he lived in that house while the rest of the park was under construction.
That's a butterfly.
10 million gallons per day coming from Blue Springs and Wishbowl. Here it's completely dry. Some spots it looks like it's not flowing at all. This is why we even call this the Ozark Mountains. This is what makes this part of the country pretty unique, is the water is about 15 foot underneath the rock right here, traveling in a hidden river. That's what Ozark means. That's what when you're saying Ozark Mountains, you're saying the Hidden River Mountains. And not just here in the canyon. When you drive around on 86 and you're in Branson, notice these rivers and creeks will flow with force, and then it'll look like they're stagnant. It'll look like it's completely dry. They're just underground. It's got this wonderful way of filtration that it flows underneath the ground and through this intricate network of caves underneath. But the fancy word for it when you're studying it is called karst. K-A-R-S-T. They're called karst topography. And there's all different countless layers of rock and underground hidden river.
Kids Cave.
Called a marker tree, or a sign tree, or a thong tree. The reason why they called it a thong tree didn't mean what it means now. It meant leather strips, cuts of animal hide that they would wrap the tree when it was young, and they would bend it over and purposely throw it at a 90-degree angle. Not just a curved tree or a bent tree, specifically grown at a sharp 90, 2 to 4 foot up, straight over, very specifically trained to mark something very specific in the forest that they wanted to remember or they wanted to show you. It almost always points you in the direction to a burial. This marker tree is leading you directly to the entrance of that 20 foot by 100 foot cave with that freshwater spring in the back of it. Yeah, I got this.
We got it.
We just have a few photo bombers up there, not too bad.
As we arrive back at the Visitor Center, they have a small nature area there and a museum of some of the Indian artifacts that they found on property. We'll be looking at both of those. Now it's time to leave for Branson. On the way back through Branson, we'll pass the Veterans Memorial Garden that they have put here to remember the veterans by. We will also pass by the Veterans Museum on the left. And now it's time for the Presley Country Jubilee. Let's enjoy the show.
Bet you wonder why I'm late.
Yes, I
Been shopping.
Shopping?
Yeah, I need some new clothes and I ain't got much money. But I went down to one of them fancy men's clothing stores.
Yeah.
Walked up to the guy down there and told him I wanted to see something cheap.
Something cheap.
He said, look in the mirror.
If you ever felt one breaking, oh, you never won. It's knowing that your door is always open and your pen is free to walk. That makes me tend to leave my sleeping bag rolled up and stashed behind your couch.
I said, little Cecil, why don't you get up and give that pretty girl your seat? He'd been mad at me ever since.
Oh, well, what's the matter with that, little Cecil? Your dad was just trying to be a gentleman.
I was sitting on Dad's lap.
Place I know, down in Tennessee where the tall corn grows, hidden from the world in a bunch of pines. The moon's a little bachelor.
Oh, yeah. All of a sudden in a blinking eye, and Cadillac stand passed by. I said, boy, is that the mark for me? If I'd been the tail, I thought you could see. Well, fellas all in me being behind, so I thought I'd make that drink and unwind. Then I put on gas and man and I shut it on down into overdrive. Oh, I wound it up so hard in my room that I hit top in my going through like lead to the floor, and all there is, there ain't no more. Right over here. Had flames coming from out the back when I started the game, and I got in my kitchen. I thought I could pass them to nobody, then we was low on gas. Had smoke coming from outside.
Get your kicks out on Route 66. Blue wives, these little red dropped into it.
Home said it looks so pretty. You should see Amarillo top down in Tennessee. Ain't no smoky smoke on rough top. Ain't no telephone bill. Once I had a gal on Rocky Top, half for the other half. Story about a man named Jed. Poor mountaineer barely kept his family fed. And one day he was shooting at some food and knocked through the ground in the bubble.
Oh, move, I must get around to it. I ain't ready.
I'm stuck in cold and breath, and time keeps dragging. Jimmy's with a little help from his outlaw friend.
Let's hear it, Johnny.
A long time forgotten, our dreams that just fell by the way. The good life he promised ain't what she's living today.
All right, Jake, give him a little Willie.
Willie!
Listen to this.
But she never complains about the bad times or the bad things he's done.
This is a special year for us. It's our 53rd year to be right here in this exact spot doing shows for nice folks like you.
And this brings us to the end of day 6.